It is another edition of Arkansas Week, and we welcome you and thank you for joining us. The stark realities facing Arkansas farmers, especially those raising row crops, notably those in the business of soybeans. There is some relief in sight, but precious little, and for many, the crisis grows worse by the hour. In a moment, an update on the situation. But first, a story not at all unrelated. The suspension of a federal program that helped feed almost 250,000 Arkansans. The fiscal stalemate in Washington has sidelined the Special Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Even should the two sides reopen the government, getting SNAP back up to speed won't be quick or easy. In the interim, in the right now, the demand for help from non-governmental organizations has skyrocketed. We are joined now by the director of one of the largest of them, Brian Burton of Arkansas Foodbank, and another, Margaret Douglas, executive director of Helping Hand of Greater Little Rock. We will begin, Margaret, with you. I said the demand has skyrocketed. That has been anecdotal, and also there have been some documented incidents. In your words, what's the demand now for food in recent days?
Demand is greater than ever before. We're opening
Than
up.
ever?
Yes,
Than
even
ever
during
before.
COVID, the numbers are, to me, we have more people waiting, more people in need. In COVID, it was sort of a flat line, people coming and going. People were afraid to get out. In this case, it's people, and they're waiting for hours to get in to see us. We opened at 9 a.m. When I left this morning, there were cars out there at 7:30, people waiting for us to open to get some type of physical food, nourishment for their families.
Brian Burton, your experience.
These are the horrific stories we're hearing from across our 33-county service area with 330 pantries on the front lines of this. Steve, most people don't realize that 80% of hunger in our country is met by federal nutrition programs. And SNAP, WIC, these programs have stopped. And therefore, the charitable food system is carrying the complete demand. And we are not set up for that. We normally meet about 20% of the need. So we're seeing a 10 to 20% increase across the state, and in urban areas, a 30% increase. COVID level demand, as Margaret said, but without the government resources.
So stay with that for just a second. The gap, NGOs, the private sector, it's an enormous burden. How close are you coming right now to closing that gap?
Oh, well, we cannot close the gap. And when the federal budget cuts were enacted last summer, we warned all of our elected leaders that we can't just step in. For every meal the charitable sector provides, SNAP provides 9 meals. So 1 to 9, it gives you an idea of the gap there. And so there's no way we can do it, but we obviously do everything we can. We are pushing out record amounts of food. The community is rallying around us and bringing us donations, but it's going to be a very serious struggle the longer this goes on.
Margaret, the scale, I mean, many of the people that you're serving, that your organization, both of you, that your organizations are serving, are they working people or are they disabled people? Who is accessing your service? Who needs your services?
The working poor, first of all, mothers who have children in hospitals, they're unable to go to work, or they lose their jobs, which are probably only paying minimum wage. Because we also partner with Arkansas Children's Hospital, we send 50 bags a week to the different clinics to try to provide food for some families. I have our elderly, disabled. We also have disabled veterans. We're there for people who just don't know where their next meal is coming from. This week when the governor was there and I introduced her to this young lady, I had a young lady in with a 2-week-old baby on her shoulder. 2 weeks. She told me she had no food at home for her children. She had been off from work due to her pregnancy, and she had a few more young kids at home, and she was there for whatever we could give her, whatever assistance, diapers and food.
Brian Burton, is that the profile you're seeing?
It's so emotional. I've been in this work 29 years, and you would think I would be familiar and not be as affected by this, but what I'm seeing right now, I've never seen in my entire career. I see desperate federal employees, 20,000 of those around our state that haven't had a paycheck in over a month. And now folks that have depended on SNAP to come into their EBT cards. We are seeing people not just shifting resources, but really desperately trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And like Margaret said, this isn't just a homeless person or some of the people that you would typically see in standing in line. Many of these are uh, middle class people and low to moderate certainly, but a lot of the people in lines look like you and me. And so this is really, in that way, similar to COVID because you're seeing so many new people come into our pop-up drive-through pantries, as well as the storefront partners like Helping Hands. And so it is a difficult, tumultuous, uncertain time, but we always say we have hope. We do have resources, and we have the know-how, we have the infrastructure. We've been doing this 41 years. We have marvelous partners. We'll do everything that we can, that we have the capacity to do.
Well, I was going to ask the federal furlough, of the furlough of so many federal employees, that has, to what extent has that intensified your workload there or the demand for your services?
Oh, Steve, we've been doing drive-through, we call them pop-up pantries at the airport for the TSA workers now for the last 3 weeks. Some of those stories will hit you hard. One lady had worked for the state for 20 years and had just switched to a federal job, and then this happened, and she's without income. One gentleman asked us how much the food boxes cost that we were handing out to the TSA workers, and we said $25. And he reaches through his window and he said, I want to pay for the person in line behind me, and gave me $25 cash. And so that just tells you that this is something that's very personal. It's neighbors, it's our community, and we feel like this is folks are under siege right now, and it's not like the tornado 2 years ago. This is a man-made problem, and it can be a man-made solution if our elected leaders will reopen the government.
Well, let's assume for a second that it is reopened this afternoon or, tomorrow morning. How fast can the program get back up and running, SNAP?
I've been told that it's still going to take a while for everything to get back online. They're looking at possibly, and they don't have an exact date of probably dispersing half of their SNAP benefits. If someone was making $500, getting $500 of SNAP, they will receive $250. If you have a family of 5, that's not going to be a lot of money. That's $250 at that one time for the month of November, and hopefully to give the other half in December. We have time. At this time, this is holiday season. Children are going to be home. When they're home, they eat more. No mother's going to sit there and tell her young child, you have to stop eating so we have enough food for tomorrow.
And of course, the 50-50 proposition is tied up in the administrative and even the legal system as we speak. Brian, what your thoughts on getting the system back up and running, assuming that there's a settlement?
Yeah, like Margaret said, I think it's going to take at least 2 or 3 weeks for funds to start flowing through the system into the EBT cards. And so we're looking at, you know, probably even if it reopened, like you said, this afternoon, it would be past Thanksgiving before things begin to stabilize. And so we're really in an uncharted territory here. Um, it does encourage me when I saw how many volunteers were at Helping Hands on Tuesday and people that had been volunteering there for 30 years. And when I see the generosity of our neighbors, that's the silver lining. Our Kansans are generous people, and they have been flooding the food bank with support. We are so grateful. But like I said, we can only do so much, but we're doing everything we can with our 13 trucks and our partners and our 100,000 square foot warehouse here on 65th Street. So I'm just grateful we have partners like Margaret and a community like this one. And we will try to bounce back from this as best we can, but it definitely is causing a lot of pain right now.
Well, the Sanders administration sent $500,000, I think, surplus fund to food banks across the state, and indicated that there might be more forthcoming, could be more forthcoming.
Yeah.
To what extent is that going to alleviate, or does that alleviate the crisis?
It helps, and we appreciate Governor Sanders. She's been out here 5 times, and she's been helpful with school breakfast and school lunch. That amount of money was split among 6 food banks across the state, and so we spent our allotment of that in about 2 or 3 hours. And so we're hoping there'll be another infusion next week. I think they're making a decision about that in the next few days. But obviously, every little bit helps. But we need to leverage big resources. I tell people that think the charitable system should just replace the government. Remind them charity did not build the Hoover Dam or send a man to the moon, and we can't replace now. We need the government to step in with significant resources.
Brian Burton and Margaret, we will leave it right there. And we thank you both for coming in and sharing your expertise with us, updating the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. And we are back. A lessening of trade tensions between the U.S. and China and some other countries. The details still a bit sketchy, and from experience, we know that tariff wars can begin and end and begin again with arresting speed. There is the prospect of some near-term relief for Arkansas producers, especially soybean farmers. But how much and how fast, and will it be enough? All up in the air. Well, we're joined now by Dr. Ryan Loy of the UA's Agricultural Extension Service. Dr. Loy, thanks for coming back with us. Understanding that we are in no place that's good, where are we?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Steve. I really appreciate it. And I think, one of the things we're looking at here is that where it's a positive step in the right direction in terms of the agreements and China's commitments to purchase more U.S. soybeans. But one of the big things about it is, even with the short-term impact being futures markets, rising and hitting the high points of the year right now, we're in that post-harvest window, and many farmers have already booked, pre-harvest and booked prices at that. And so, while there'll be some, and there'll be a lot that can take advantage of these higher prices, you still have a lot that had to accept a lower price because of what they had booked beforehand and sold before these agreements come. So it's a great positive step in the right direction, but wish it would have came a little bit sooner in terms of those prices and the market expectations. And, China is now committing to purchase 12 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans before January 2026 and committed to 25 million metric tons for the 2027 through 2029 marketing years. And so really those are the big things that are coming out of this. But as you mentioned, details are still a little bit fuzzy in terms of when something will be formally signed and agreed upon, and those sorts of things when it comes to those agreements.
Well, assuming that that the purchase agreements announced thus far hold, and that there's not a reversal of that again, how does that compare to the normal bulk of trade that occurs in beans between U.S. and China?
Well, when we're looking at the last few years, this is right in line, a little bit less, but about right in line with what China has been purchasing with us from the first trade war and after the phase one deal. So we're looking at kind of a return to just about the average, and those are the kind of things we're looking at. Um, Looking at this though, and so far, of course, we can't really get the data with the government shutdown right now, but hearing reports that China's bought few cargoes, and so there's a lot to be purchased before the end of the year if they're going to follow through with 12 million metric tons. That would basically set a record during that time of the year if they were to follow through on that. And the question that I have, when we're looking at these trade deals is, are these purchases being made in good faith and because of the agreement, or is it based on what's the most economical choice from China's perspective? And even with this deal and with the reduction in tariffs coming from this deal as well, we're still looking at Brazil being able to be more cost competitive on the marketplace. And not just Brazil, South America as a whole, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. And so, if we're looking at it from an economical perspective, I'm really curious to see, especially with Brazilian soybeans coming online in terms of their harvest in January. So, there's a lot to be purchased still, and still a lot of potential for those purchases.
Right. Well, let's stay with that for just a second now. Harking back to the last days of the Carter administration and the wheat embargo against the Soviets, one of the effects of that was the loss of U.S. markets, and those markets haven't fully recovered. How concerned should we be that we have permanently ceded some CEDED, some of our market territory to the Southern Hemisphere?
Well, that's a really great question. I think that that's one that, I think that the ship has sailed in terms of getting our entire market share back that may have had before the first trade war. Like I said, this is a step in the right direction, but for us, China, the entire world's imports of soybeans. If the entire world imported soybeans, that's 61% of what China typically would import in terms of soybeans from all over. And so that's a significant market. And so it's going to take, a lot of time to diversify into other markets that we could get into, that are other than China. But in terms of regaining that market share, at the end of the day, there's a lot of politics involved, but it's really what's cost effective for that importer. And in the last few years, it's really been South America being that cost competitive, cheapest option for the soybean commodity. And that's something that hopefully this trade deal will alleviate and help, especially with the reduction of tariffs.
Well, to use your phrase, if the ship has in fact sailed, the implications for Arkansas, well, for American farmers, but Arkansas farmers in particular, seem pretty profound.
Absolutely, it is, and this is a positive, agreement, but farmers are still struggling, right? Like I mentioned, a lot of them have booked at lower prices, and even with the upswing in prices as of late since this agreement, we're still looking at losses per acre for soybeans in terms of, especially if you rent your land or you do a crop share. Those prices still have not recovered to that level, and looking at these prices, they may have been profitable 4 or 5 years ago, but those inputs to grow that crop have just stayed high and have not really come down since COVID and the Russian Ukraine war starting. And so it's still dire, and it's going to take time to find those other markets. But at the end of the day, farmers are resilient. They're the best businessmen and women I've ever met. And so they're going to get through this. It's just going to take time, and it will take a lot of effort on everybody's part to get there.
Yeah, is there also the question of market saturation? It would appear that there's a market for just so many tons of soybeans and corn and wheat and other row crops.
That's correct. And especially when you're looking at the supplies overall, I mean, our supply overall in the world is, outpacing that demand at current levels. Without on the US side, without some demand growth that's sustained, it's going to be difficult to see how that demand can keep up with our supply in the short term. I think that in the long term, we're looking at, crush expansion, domestically to help with that, to increase some of that domestic demand a little bit more. And in the short term, try to continue to utilize China and, use this trade deal to kind of get that, get the soybeans moving.
Some of the other factors in play, production costs, we got maybe a little bit of a break. It'll take time maybe to filter down, and that's some help from the Fed. But there's also diesel prices, seed prices, so many other components of production that are pretty difficult right now to manage.
Yes, sir. When we're looking at, fertilizer inputs, chemical inputs, you know, overall and on average, we really only import those fertilizers, right? And so if we're importing those, if our inputs are imported and they've maintained being expensive and haven't really come down, add maybe tariffs on top of that as well. You're looking at a very difficult situation that farmers are stuck in. Called kind of that cost price squeeze that we've seen. They're just getting squeezed, and even if there's an upside potential of prices, like I mentioned, those prices are still not at levels where the typical Arkansas producer can profit off of it. They may be able to break even at some of these prices if they own the land, but if they rent, you're still looking at, negative returns on that acre. And really, a lot of what we're looking at now is driven by that input side.
Well, again, your phrase, too little, too late, the agreements that were announced recently, the purchase agreements, for those farmers, Arkansas farmers, for whom it may be too little, too late. How many are we talking about here? What's the scope of the losses?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we're looking at, a significant loss, a very significant loss in terms of, like I mentioned, the farmers who had booked before, and booked on the futures market or just had a forward contract at some set price before this agreement. I mean, they're accepting a much lower price, and maybe they can do that to some degree, but most overall, on average, cannot do that. And so, we're looking at significant losses. But at the same time, no, nobody wants just the governmental help. They'd rather run their business and be left alone. But we've looked at, with the one big beautiful bill, there's been increases in that farm safety net, and hopefully the goal is that that would kick in this year and really help people get through this time.
Nonetheless, are we looking at some producers who are simply going to hang it up, go out of business?
Oh, absolutely. And, it would be, speculation in terms of how many, but, this is becoming untenable, right? And so you lose money in one year, maybe you have reserves that you can, use and it'll get better the next year, right? And maybe have some carryover, in your loans and things that you can work. But when you have almost 4 years, back to back to back of low commodity prices, high input cost, and little to negative returns, it's going to become a time where farmers just don't want to just continue to lose money anymore, and will hang it up. And we've seen that in some preliminary data in terms of some of the Chapter 12 filings, bankruptcy filings, and some of the Chapter 7 filings as well.
Yeah, we've got a minute or so remaining. How quickly can Washington act, and will it act fast enough?
I think that's the $1 million question, Steve. And with the government shutdown, when we're looking at, let's say, for example, last year's farm safety nets, payments were supposed to go out on October 1, but with the government shutdown, that didn't happen. Now, there's been some FSA offices, Farm Service Agency offices, that have opened up, to kind of to make sure that money gets released and into the hands of farmers. But when we're looking at a government shutdown, combined with a very, severe and, time that's very volatile, it's kind of a perfect storm in terms of what could happen to the farm economy. And again, it's something that I know that, resilient farmers that they'll get through. And we just have to continue to work to find other markets to fit the need. And, the government can help with that. And so those are the things that we're looking at.
All right, Dr. Ryan Loy, that does it for us for this edition. But anyway, we'll have you back soon. Update this, the ag economy situation in Arkansas and across the country. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
All right, and that does it for us for this week. Thanks for joining us as always, and we'll see you next week.